That's right. Yeah, no, it's just like cheap and nasty high rise. No one does anything here, you know. Yeah, no, you should be good there.
Okay,
It's
good.
not like Richmond. That whole South Richmond area is where the Liberals are the strongest in the whole of this area, especially 23. But that's so there's good opportunity to pick up a few votes here. You know.
Today we really want people to try to knock between us 10,000 doors in one day. That's what we're aiming for today. So it's a big task, but I think we're ready. The weather has turned out for us, and the people have turned out. So just a couple of things on what's worked in the door knocking in Richmond so far. The main thing, to be honest, that works, and Steve can look away now, is talking about Steve Jolly. Steve Jolly's been a councillor in Yarra since 2004, which means that most people that you talk to will know the name Steve Jolly. So whenever we're door knocking here, we have the leaflet out with his nice face on it and say, hey, we're door knocking for Steve Jolly, do you know him? That's all you need to say to start off with. And a bunch of people say, yeah, actually I do. He's a councillor, he's done this or that, he's good, oh I like the guy, I respect the guy, whatever. So it's probably the easiest door knock a bunch of people will get to do this whole campaign. Of course there are a few people who don't like him. They're usually rich and someone's done something they don't like in their backyard and we go, okay, never mind, move on. So Steve will say a few things about some of the other issues around the area, but I really think the main thing that people want to do is say that we're campaigning to get Steve Jolly into State Parliament to take some of his achievements that he's achieved in Yarra so far to the next level and to really shake things up. Steve, what do you want to say about Richmond?
For a lot of people in this part of Melbourne, the events of Friday are still quite raw and traumatic, and we on the left understand that the backbone of that situation is the imperialist invasion and occupation by Western troops of the Middle East and Afghanistan, in the same way as you can't understand the Irish War, the so-called Troubles, without understanding 800 years of British colonialism. But specifically, with the incident on Friday, we as a party have got the best policies when it comes to public health and mental health, because it's quite clear that this individual had a mental health issue. And the third thing is that we stand strong against any attempt to capitalise parasitically on the tragic events on Friday to victimise our Muslim brothers and sisters through Islamophobia. And it's no coincidence, in fact it's a very good coincidence, that in an hour and 3/4 I won't be on the door knock, I'll be on the Carlton Public Housing Estate, because the Eritrean community have organised a meeting for all of the Horn of African tenants on the Carlton Public Housing, but they've also mobilised on the Collingwood and Fitzroy Public Housing to hear our ideas for this election campaign. And obviously we'll touch upon the events of last week and how we stand in solidarity with any community that's been witch hunted and scapegoated because of tragic events like last Friday. I have to say just some things that we've been going so long now, we're beginning to get a bit tired, but for the vast majority of people, they're just beginning to wake up to this election. That's sort of an unfortunate fact of life. This weekend, this leaflet came out yesterday. It's not the best laid out leaflet we've ever done. I hope the layout person isn't here, but it works a treat. It's all in the languages, and it's our public housing leaflet. It's being distributed as we speak, on the Fitzroy, Collingwood, Richmond, North Melbourne, Carlton, and the Nicholson Street estates to thousands of public housing tenants. And for the first time, our leaflet actually has our how to vote card on it. If anybody wants to take a photograph of this at the end, so if anyone says they can just copy one off you. We're really getting to the business end. Obviously, what you said, Roz, to a certain degree is true, but you wouldn't be a very good socialist councillor if you haven't pissed off some bad people as a councillor in the last 14 years. Yesterday when we were door knocking, I think it was Beth, found somebody who said, I'm not voting for the socialists because Steve's been on the council. He put my business out of work because I was not paying my workers properly. We were that. So you're going to get a bit of that, But overwhelmingly, but don't, just because we're in the inner city and it's gentrified and everyone seems to be pretty engaged, the number of people who don't get that we're not standing in the lower house, that's a death roll between the Greens, Kathleen Moulton, and the ALP, Richard Wynne. we're standing in the upper house, and what the pressure that we've been able to bring to bear on the Labour and the Greens on council, we want to do the state level. So to vote for us, you've got to put 1. It's actually, we said 12 on Facebook, but it's actually L, box L, which is L is the 12th letter of the alphabet, if you didn't know. That's what we want people to put 1 next to vote for. Yeah, exactly, left. Very good, very good. She's a natural at this shit. So that's pretty much it. Just we've been getting 21 to 25% of people who answer the door saying they'll vote for us, which is phenomenal. On that basis, Colleen, Bolger and Sue Bolton will also be in the friggin' upper house. Obviously, you know,
We should have had 4 candidates.
we should have had 4 candidates, mate. Mick, mate, it's not too late. We might be able to whack you on at the end. Sandra will never forgive you.
The campaign has huge momentum now. There's no doubt that it is the biggest campaign to get a socialist elected in living memory. The campaign has united the socialists around Melbourne, but also drawn in lots of new people who are excited about the prospect of getting Steve into the upper house. I was working from the Victorian Socialists office last week, and it struck me just how many people were constantly coming in to get materials to put in letterboxes, to hand out at train stations, finalising the rosters for the pre-poll. We will have hundreds of volunteers over the next couple of weeks involved in the campaign, so it's really inspiring to be a part of it.
And what's been the response from the public when you've been door knocking these areas?
There's no doubt that socialism is no longer a dirty word. People are happy to hear what we've got to say. In this area of Richmond, people know about Steve. He is renowned as a local councillor for the issues that he's taken up and fought around, like the East-West link, the stopping holding citizenship ceremonies on January 26, but also just doing the basic work that an elected representative should do of answering people's emails and their letters. That means a lot to people. When you go further out, it's so striking the absolute contempt people have for the major parties. A lot of Labor voters in areas like Broadmeadows and Thomastown, people that have voted Labor all of their life, have absolutely no love for them. And so people are receptive to the idea that socialists would stand up for working class communities and be something different.
We've been working really, really hard. We've got posters up everywhere. I think we pretty much out-campaigned all our opposition, all our opponents in the northern suburbs by way of the number of door knockers, the number of posters up. I mean, some people, like in the bigger parties, have paid for massive big posters that we can't match in terms of the cost and the size of them. But any type of medium or small-sized posters, the general, show of our campaign is it's way broader than any other. We've knocked on more doors, so I think the response that we've been getting is really good, and I think we're in with a red-hot chance of winning that last spot.
What are the concerns or issues that the people are raising when you do knock on their doors in his electorate?
Housing affordability, inappropriate development, unemployment, lack of jobs, public transport being not accessible to people in the northern suburbs. It's a very, very long way for everybody. Cost of living, privatisation, just many utility bills have gone through the roof. So it's really, bread and butter class issues.
And what about the preference flows? Has Victorian Socialists made a decision about that?
Yeah, well, we always preference from left to right. We don't do dodgy deals. So we're preferencing Greens, unless it's some left-wing independent. So, for example, in Preston, we're going to go Gaetano first, after us, obviously, and then Greens. Then we'd go for Labour, Liberal, and then any far right, and we'd sort of put Reason and Animal Justice Party, people like that, somewhere in between the Greens and the ALP.
I mean, a lot of the issues that we're campaigning around, like deprivatisation, putting utilities and transport and all of that back into public hands, for a lot of people that is really just common sense. You find that the opinions of people in this electorate are often way more left-wing than the opinions that are represented by any of the major politicians and in the media. So yeah, there's been a huge amount of positive reception for our project, and in particular in areas like Yarra, City of Yarra, where Steve's a councillor. A lot of people already know him and respect the work that he's done in defence of working class communities, against racism, things like that. So yeah, it's been a really great experience. I think one of the overwhelming issues that people have raised is the cost of living, the fact that you can live in an economy that's in boom, and yet also the cost of rent, the cost of housing, the cost of utilities, that is all just skyrocketing. So the argument that we make about how these things should be put back into public hands, there should be funding for public housing, things like that, and caps on rent like they have in places in New York and Berlin, that for a lot of people is really something they care about and they want to see.
We've knocked on thousands of doors and we're reaching new people, and also to really meet people at the political level where they're at. So there is an overwhelming cynicism, we do encounter that, that's for sure, and there's overwhelming distrust in the whole political system. So we are finding people, new people, that are very receptive to ideas and want genuine and meaningful change, and are willing to support a socialist organisation that will stand on a principled basis. I think people are disgusted with neoliberal economic politics over the last 20, 30 years, that it's delivered them nothing. Housing prices are out of control. It's particularly difficult for youth to enter the housing market. But it's not just that, it's also their jobs as well. People live an increasingly precarious existence, and they just feel that there are no political voices out there that represent them. And so for us, we're finding some positive connections with people. I think one of the biggest things I'm finding, particularly amongst blue-collar people, is that privatisations have just been a lie. They've been delivered on a lie that will give better services, but we see public transport has deteriorated, it's getting ever more expensive, and same with electricity and every other service that's been privatised. And now we see the most fundamental and basic of services, housing, being privatised. I think for a lot of people, particularly the poor in the inner city, this is the last straw, and the Victorian Socialists are one of the only political organisations to speak out on this.